The rain fell in sheets, blurring the world outside the diner into a watercolor of gray and neon. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of frying bacon and old coffee. For the Iron Sentinels Motorcycle Club, it was just another stop on a long road, a place to shed their wet leather and find a moment of warmth. There were 5 of them, folded into a booth meant for 4, a quiet island of black leather and worn denim in a sea of pastel-colored families and solitary travelers. Victor, their president, nursed a black coffee, his eyes scanning the room with a calm that came from decades of watching the world. Beside him, Tank, built like the refrigerator he was named after, methodically worked his way through a stack of pancakes. Across the table sat Shadow and Doc, locked in a low conversation. And then there was Grizz. He sat at the end of the booth, his back to the wall, a mountain of a man with a beard that seemed to hold the dust of 1,000 highways. His real name was Arthur, but no one had called him that in 30 years. He stared out the window, but he wasn't seeing the rain. He was seeing ghosts. Today was his 53rd birthday, a fact he had shared with no one. Birthdays were not for celebration. They were markers, gravestones for years lost. For him, they were reminders of a silence that had started in childhood and grown into a companion. Across the diner, a little girl sat with her mother. The girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, had wide, curious eyes that missed nothing. Her name was Lily, and she was watching the bikers. She wasn't scared like the other children who were shushed by their parents and told not to stare. She was fascinated. Her mother, Sarah, looked tired. A deep, weary sadness etched around her eyes. She kept glancing nervously at the man sitting with them, a man in a crisp polo shirt and expensive watch who exuded a chilling aura of control. He didn't speak to them, only at them, his voice a low, constant murmur of correction and complaint. Lily overheard the waitress, a kind woman named Brenda, approach the biker's table. "Anything else for you boys? Another slice of pie for the birthday boy?" she asked, winking at Grizz, who she'd known from their regular stops over the years. Grizz just shook his head, a slight, almost imperceptible motion. But Lily heard it. Birthday boy. Her eyes fixed on the big, sad man with the beard. He looked lonely, the kind of lonely she felt sometimes when her mother cried in her room at night. A quiet determination settled in her small chest. She slipped out of her booth while the man, Mark, was distracted by his phone. Her mother's hand twitched, a silent plea for her to come back, but it was too late. Lily walked on silent feet to the counter where the day-old cupcakes sat under a plastic dome. She didn't have any money, not even a penny, but she looked at Brenda with an earnestness that could move mountains. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's for the sad man's birthday." Brenda's tired face softened. She looked from the little girl with the worn-out shoes to the quiet giant in the corner. Without a word, she slid a small vanilla cupcake onto a plate and handed it to Lily. She even found a single unlit candle and stuck it in the center. Lily took the plate with both hands, as if she were carrying a precious jewel, and made her way to the biker's booth. The entire diner seemed to hold its breath. Patrons paused with forks halfway to their mouths. Conversations faltered. Victor saw her coming and put a hand on Tank's arm, a silent command to stay still. The little girl stopped right in front of Grizz, her head barely reaching the tabletop. She held up the plate. Grizz looked down, his weathered face a mask of confusion. He saw the cupcake, the single white candle, and the small, determined face looking up at him. And then the little girl began to sing. Her voice was small and a little off-key, but it cut through the diner's low hum like a bell. "Happy birthday to you," she sang, her eyes locked on his. "Happy birthday to you." Something inside Grizz, a wall he had spent a lifetime building, began to crack. The silence he carried was not empty. It was filled with the echoes of things he never had, of kindnesses never shown. A birthday song was a foreign language from a country he had never been allowed to visit. He felt a stinging in his eyes, a hot, unfamiliar pressure behind his sternum. "Happy birthday, dear biker," Lily sang, her voice gaining a little confidence. "Happy birthday to you." She finished, holding the plate out a little further. The diner was utterly silent. No one moved, no one breathed. They were all watching the giant of a man and the tiny girl with the cupcake. A single tear escaped Grizz's eye, tracing a path through the dust and grime on his cheek before disappearing into his thick beard. He didn't wipe it away. He couldn't move. He just stared at the girl, at this impossible, miraculous offering. A slow, rusty smile, the first one he'd felt in years, began to form on his lips. The spell was broken by a sharp, angry voice. "Lily, what in the world do you think you're doing?" Mark was on his feet, his face a mask of cold fury. He strode over and grabbed Lily's arm, his fingers digging into her fragile bicep. "Get back here right now. Stop bothering these people." The last word was filled with contempt. Lily flinched, a small cry of pain escaping her lips. The cupcake wobbled on the plate. Sarah was already half out of her booth, her face pale with terror. "Mark, please, she was just being nice." "Nice? She's making a scene," he hissed, his grip tightening. "She needs to learn some discipline." Before Mark could drag the girl away, a low voice, calm and steady as a granite slab, cut through the tension. "That's enough." It was Victor. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved from his seat. But the authority in those 3 words brought Mark to a dead stop. Mark turned, his handsome face twisting into a sneer. He looked Victor up and down, taking in the road-worn leather vest and the club patches. His eyes dripped with condescension. "I'm sorry. Is there a problem here? This is a private family matter. My daughter was being rude, and I am handling it." Victor slowly placed his coffee cup on the table. The small click of ceramic on formica echoed in the silent room. "The girl was being kind," he said, his voice still level. "You're the one being rude, and you're hurting her. Let go of her arm." It wasn't a request. A flush crept up Mark's neck. He was used to being in charge, to people being intimidated by his wealth and his confident smile. "I don't think you have any right to tell me how to raise my child," he blustered, trying to regain control. He gave Lily's arm a sharp tug. That was when Tank stood up. He didn't do it quickly. He rose like a mountain range, unfolding to his full 6'6" height, casting a shadow that seemed to swallow Mark whole. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, his arms crossed over his massive chest, his expression unreadable. The air around their table grew heavy, charged with a potential energy that made the hairs on everyone's arms stand up. Mark's bravado began to falter. His eyes darted from Tank's impassive face to Victor's cold, steady gaze. He was outnumbered, and he was beginning to understand that the rules he operated by, rules of social status and perceived power, did not apply here, but his arrogance was a deep well. "Look," he said, forcing a laugh, "this is all a misunderstanding. She's just a little high-strung. We'll be on our way." He tried to pull Lily again, a desperate move to assert his dominance one last time. "I said," Victor repeated, his voice dropping an octave, becoming something like gravel rolling downhill. "Let her go." Shadow, who had been silent until now, leaned forward slightly. He was smaller than the others, wiry and intense, with eyes that seemed to see right through people. "It's interesting," Shadow said, his voice soft but carrying. "You keep saying, 'my daughter,' but her name is Lily Evans. Her mother is Sarah Evans. Your name is Marcus Thorne. You're not related at all, are you, Marcus?" The color drained from Mark's face. His carefully constructed facade shattered like cheap glass. The charming boyfriend, the disciplinarian father figure, It all evaporated, leaving behind something ugly and panicked. How do you know my name? He stammered, his grip on Lily's arm finally loosening. We make it our business to know things, Shadow replied smoothly. For instance, we know about the restraining order filed against you by an ex-girlfriend in Portland. We know you lost your job for inappropriate conduct. And we know you've been following Sarah for 6 weeks, ever since she tried to leave you. Shadow slid a phone across the table, its screen lit up with a database entry displaying Mark's face and a list of his transgressions. Mark stared at the phone, his mind racing. The hunters had become the hunted. His control, his power was an illusion. It had been stripped away in a greasy spoon diner by men he had dismissed as roadside trash. Panic set in, raw and primal. He shoved Sarah aside, trying to clear a path to the door. You're crazy, all of you. He made a desperate lunge for the exit. He never made it. Tank's arm shot out, not in a punch, but in a swift, controlled motion. His hand clamped down on Mark's shoulder. There was a dull, sickening sound as muscle and bone met an immovable object. Mark cried out, a sharp, pathetic yelp, and crumpled to the linoleum floor, his escape attempt ending before it had truly begun. He lay there, whimpering, his arrogance replaced by a sniveling fear. The tension in the diner broke. Someone gasped. Another person started to clap, then stopped, unsure. Victor nodded once at Tank, a silent, well done. The threat was neutralized. The intervention was complete. If you believe that sometimes the most intimidating exteriors hide the kindest hearts, take a moment to show your support. Like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories that matter, and share it with someone who needs to see that heroes don't always wear capes. Now, let's get back to the story. In the aftermath of the brief, decisive action, the diner was a tableau of suspended motion. Mark was a whimpering heap on the floor, and the bikers stood as silent sentinels around the booth. It was Doc who moved first. He slid out of his seat and knelt beside Sarah, who was trembling, holding Lily tight against her. Doc's hands, though calloused from years of gripping handlebars, were surprisingly gentle. He had been a combat medic in the Army, and his calm in the face of chaos was absolute. "Are you hurt?" he asked Sarah, his voice low and reassuring. "Did he hurt you or the girl?" Sarah shook her head, unable to speak, tears streaming down her face. Doc then turned his attention to Lily, who was peering out from behind her mother's legs, her wide eyes fixed on the scene. "Hey there, little singer," he said softly. "That was a brave thing you did." He checked her arm where Mark had grabbed it, noting the red marks already forming. "That's going to be sore, but you'll be okay. You're safe now. We've got you." Meanwhile, Grizz finally found his feet. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace, kneeling down in front of Lily until he was at her eye level. The giant of a man, who had been brought to tears by her song, looked at her with an expression of profound gratitude. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a worn Zippo lighter. With a flick of his thumb, a small flame danced to life. He carefully lit the single candle on the cupcake, which still sat on the table. The tiny flame cast a warm glow on their faces. "That," Grizz said, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely showed, "was the best birthday song I have ever heard in my entire life." "Thank you, Lily." He pushed the plate with the lit cupcake gently towards her. "Happy birthday," she whispered back, a small, watery smile appearing on her face. That was the moment that broke the dam. Throughout the diner, sniffles could be heard. Brenda, the waitress, was openly weeping behind the counter. An elderly man in a booth nearby took off his glasses to wipe his eyes. They hadn't just witnessed a confrontation, they had witnessed an act of profound tenderness, a moment of light in the midst of ugliness. The image of the massive, tear-streaked biker lighting a candle for the little girl who sang to him was seared into their collective memory. The wail of a siren grew louder, and soon A police car pulled up outside. The local sheriff, a man named Brody with a weary face and knowing eyes, stepped inside. He took in the scene at a glance. Mark on the floor, Tank standing over him, and the rest of the sentinels calmly waiting. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Victor," he said, his tone one of resigned familiarity, "care to tell me why I have 3 separate 911 calls about your boys starting a riot in my diner?" "No riot, Sheriff," Victor said calmly. "Just helping a lady and her daughter with a pest problem." He gestured with his chin toward Mark. "This is Marcus Thorne. Outstanding warrants in Oregon. We have a file we can forward to you." Sheriff Brody had a long and complicated history with the Iron Sentinels. He didn't like their methods, but he couldn't deny their results. More than once they had quietly solved problems that official channels couldn't or wouldn't touch. He saw the red marks on the little girl's arm and the terror in her mother's eyes, and he understood. He and his deputy cuffed Mark, who was now blubbering about lawsuits and police brutality. As the deputies hauled Mark to his feet, his bravado returned for one last venomous burst. He locked eyes with Sarah, his face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this, Sarah. You hear me? You can't hide from me. I'll find you, and when I do—" He was cut off by Victor's voice, still quiet, but now carrying the chilling finality of a judge's sentence. "No, you won't," Victor said, meeting Mark's gaze. "Because if you ever come within 100 miles of this town again, if you ever so much as breathe their names, we will know, and we will find you first. We'll be waiting." The promise hung in the air, absolute and terrifying. Mark's face went white. He knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that it wasn't an idle threat. He was led out of the diner, a defeated man who had picked a fight with the wrong giants. With the immediate threat gone, a new reality began to set in for Sarah. She was free, but she was also adrift. She had no money, no job, and a car that was barely running. The apartment she'd fled was in Mark's name. She and Lily had nowhere to go. The initial wave of relief was quickly followed by a tsunami of fear and uncertainty. She clutched her daughter, the weight of their predicament pressing down on her. Victor seemed to read her mind. "You and the little one aren't alone in this," he said, his tone softening. "We've got a room at a motel for you for a few nights. On us. Get some rest. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." He handed her a key card and a wad of cash that Brenda had collected from the other patrons, who had silently emptied their wallets onto the counter. The whole town, it seemed, was now on her side. Later that night, at the Iron Sentinels clubhouse on the edge of town, the 5 bikers sat around a heavy oak table. The place was part garage, part fortress, filled with the smell of leather, oil, and old wood. A younger member, a prospect named Ricky, voiced the practical concerns. "President, this is a lot. A motel, maybe more. This guy Thorne sounds like he has connections. Is this our fight?" Victor looked at the young man, not with anger, but with the patience of a teacher. "This is always our fight, son," he said, his voice resonating in the quiet room. "You see our patch? It's not just a logo, it's a promise. We protect those who can't protect themselves. We stand for the ones who have been knocked down. That little girl in the diner, she's one of ours now, her mother too. This isn't a debate. This is who we are." A murmur of agreement went around the table. The club was a brotherhood forged not just on the road, but in a shared code of honor. They mobilized their resources with quiet efficiency. Shadow, who had a past in military intelligence, spent the night on his laptop, digging into Mark's life and ensuring any legal claim he had on Sarah was severed. Tank, who owned a small but successful security installation company, began planning how to secure a new home for them. Doc made calls to a social worker he knew, arranging counseling for both Sarah and Lily. The next day, news of what happened at the diner had spread through the small town like wildfire. The story of the big, scary bikers defending a mother and child from a bully had transformed them. They were no longer the outlaws to be feared. They were local heroes. The collection jar at the diner overflowed. The motel owner refused to charge for the room. The owner of the local grocery store gave Sarah a gift card for a month's worth of food. The community, inspired by the Sentinel's decisive action, had rallied around this broken family. Victor and Grizz found Sarah and Lily a small, clean 2-bedroom apartment above a flower shop. The landlord, a friend of the club, gave them the first 3 months free. Tank and his crew spent an afternoon installing new locks, window sensors, and a security camera pointed at the front door, all free of charge. Another club member who ran a small accounting firm heard Sarah had bookkeeping experience and offered her a job. No questions asked. Within a week, Sarah and Lily had the beginnings of a new life, a safe home, a steady job, and the support of an entire community. They had been given a permanent solution, a fortress not of brick and mortar, but of kindness and protection, all built by the men they were once told to fear. A few days later, once they were settled, Sarah knew she had to thank them properly. With Lily holding her hand, she drove to the Sentinel's clubhouse. It was an intimidating place from the outside, a nondescript warehouse with heavy steel doors. As she knocked, her heart pounded in her chest. The door was opened by Tank, who broke into a warm smile when he saw them. "Hey there," he rumbled, "come on in. We were hoping you'd stop by." The inside was surprisingly clean and organized. Bikes in various states of repair stood gleaming under fluorescent lights. In the center of the room was the big oak table. Victor, Shadow, and Doc were there, but Lily only had eyes for Grizz, who was sitting by himself, cleaning a piece of chrome. She ran to him without hesitation and wrapped her small arms around his leg. Grizz froze, then, slowly, hesitantly, he rested a hand on her head. Sarah stood before Victor, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you," she began, tears welling in her eyes. "You've given us everything. A home, a job. You gave us our lives back. I have to ask, why? Why would you do all of this for complete strangers?" Victor looked at his brothers, then nodded toward Grizz. "He can tell you better than I can." Grizz looked down at Lily, who was now showing him a drawing she had made. He gently took the paper from her and then looked at Sarah, his eyes holding a deep, ancient sadness. "When I was about her age," he said, his voice a low, rough whisper, "my birthdays, they weren't happy days. My old man, he was a lot like Mark, mean, drank too much. He said birthdays were for rich kids, said I didn't deserve a cake or a song or anything at all." He paused, the memory still raw after all these years. "One year, I think I was 7, my mother saved up for weeks to buy me a little toy car. He found it. He broke it right in front of me. Told me it was to teach me that wanting things only leads to disappointment. That day I promised myself that if I ever got big and strong, no one would ever feel that way again on my watch. Not on their birthday. Not on any day." He looked around at his club brothers. "We've all got a story like that," he continued. "Different names, different towns, but the same story. A father's belt, an empty cupboard, a world that looked the other way. We started this club, this family, to be the people we needed when we were kids. We stand up for the ones no one else will stand up for. That's the code. So when your little girl sang to me, she wasn't just singing to some old biker. She was singing to that 7-year-old boy who never got a song. She reminded me why we do this." Sarah was crying freely now, tears of understanding and gratitude. The bikers weren't just rebels, unloud machines. They were wounded healers, men who had turned their own pain into a shield for others. Lily, who had been listening intently, held up her drawing for Grizz to see properly. It was a crayon masterpiece. It showed a huge, smiling biker with a big beard, holding hands with a little girl. The biker was wearing a leather vest with the Iron Sentinel's patch on the back, and on his head, Lily had drawn a bright yellow crown. "You're the birthday king," she said with absolute certainty. Grizz took the drawing with a reverence usually reserved for sacred texts. He stared at it, a slow smile spreading across his face, lighting up his weary eyes. "Yeah," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I guess I am." This simple piece of paper, this gift from a child he had protected, was worth more to him than all the chrome and steel in the garage. It was a symbol of his redemption, a testament to a promise kept. 1 year passed, the seasons turned, and the rain that had once seemed to wash out the world was replaced by bright, clear sunshine. In her new apartment, filled with the scent of flowers from the shop below, Lily danced around a small living room decorated with pink and purple streamers. Sarah brought out a birthday cake, this one covered in 7 lit candles, her face relaxed and happy. She had excelled at her job and was now the firm's office manager. The fear that had been her constant companion was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. Her life and Lily's had been completely remade. They were safe, they were happy, and they were loved, not just by each other, but by a sprawling, unconventional family of men in leather vests. Every few weeks, a group of sentinels would stop by just to check in. Grizz was a regular visitor, often showing up with a small toy or a book for Lily. He was teaching her how to play chess, and she was teaching him how to laugh again. Miles away, in the Iron Sentinel's clubhouse, a new edition hung on the wall. In a handsome oak frame right beside the club's founding charter was Lily's crayon drawing of the birthday king. It had become a sacred artifact, a constant reminder of their purpose. New prospects were shown the drawing and told the story of the little girl, the cupcake, and the song. It was a lesson in what it truly meant to be a sentinel, that their strength wasn't measured in horsepower or fists, but in their capacity to protect the vulnerable. The drawing was their North Star, guiding them forward, always forward. Real heroes are often found in the places we least expect. They don't always wear uniforms or fly through the sky. Sometimes they ride motorcycles and are covered in tattoos. They are the ones who hear a cry for help when everyone else hears only noise. They are the ones who answer a call they never expected to receive, armed with nothing but a code of honor and a heart that remembers its own pain. The story of Grizz and Lily reminds us that the greatest acts of courage are often quiet acts of kindness, and that sometimes a simple song offered at the right moment has the power to save not just one life, but many.